One of my dream to open a new league, database league, and don't find presidential names there.
So
It never happened before.
That would be your happy ending, to open a league and there's no president in the data.
No president, and see, like, I have nothing to do. Because every league, every president.
Czech Center for Investigative Reporting and Dark Riviera present Protagonista, a war room content project hosted by Pavla Holcová. Protagonista puts investigative reporters at the heart of the story. Anna Babinets is a Ukrainian investigative journalist whose career intimately follows the political developments of her country. Her first big break came when the corrupt President Yanukovych fled to Russia after the Revolution of Dignity, and Anna and her colleagues managed to save thousands of documents proving his misdeeds. So Anna, how did you venture into investigative reporting? Because you are doing it for already some time, and you founded in 2012, you co-founded your investigative media called Slidstvo. So what was the beginning?
The beginning in investigative journalism was in 2008. So
You've been like 10 years old.
something like this. No, actually before that I worked as a reporter for politics. I was going to parliament, talking to politicians, and it was pretty boring for me. I was working for a news magazine, for some newspapers. And then one Ukrainian journalist who just established an investigative agency, first investigative agency, he invited me to work as for investigations about army. It was a little bit crazy by that time because Ukrainian army in 2009, it was like nothing. No one cares how it worked. But I start to figure out what's going on with aviation, what's going on with property of army. And it was really interesting to operate with something, not talking to politicians, but it was not very popular. Because Ukrainian army, really, people didn't want to know what's going on because we didn't know that we will have the war with Russia, and people just Soviet army or something. But it was interesting for me. Then I worked as reporter on TV. It was an investigative TV program in Ukraine. And then with my colleague Dmytro Hnap, we decided that we want to create some investigative agency doing investigations because we already had sources. We already had it was like we were like underground journalists, not a lot of people were watching and reading our stories. And politicians didn't care about our stories. So we mostly looked like crazy people who just tried to find something, for what, who knew. I just felt that it's interesting to find something which some big people try to hide. That was like game for me. We didn't have money. We didn't have anything, just...
You have the dedication to investigative reporting and you have experience, right?
Yes.
So you went with Dmytro Hnap and founded Slidstvo, and you just got into some really important, really interesting stories. For example, the end of Yanukovych and the project Yanukovych Leaks. So, February 2014.
Yeah.
How did you learn that Yanukovych fled the country?
Every day I worked on Maidan in the main square where protests happened, and it was morning, 6 a.m. I remember that one of my friends was killed in Maidan, and it was a ceremony of memorial in the morning, and I was sitting next to the Maidan, and then someone called me or texted me because I got a lot of messages that Yanukovych left. It was like 6:30 a.m. And my first decision was I should go to his residence. because, his residence, Yanukovych residence, is next to Kiev, like 20 kilometers from Kiev, very good road for him, especially because in Ukraine, generally, we don't have good road. And for many years before that, it was very interesting and important place for journalists because we used all his money, mostly corrupted money. It was the place where he accumulated all interesting stuff.
So could you tell me the place is called Medjugorje. So when you first got in, he fled the country and I guess he didn't let the gates open. You needed to somehow get in.
Yeah, but actually, when I came there, it was a lot of people around already. Some civilians, they organized kind of security around. It's a very big place, actually. But I was from Kolomoyskyi TV. It was very popular. I just came there. It was a lot of local people and other people who tried to come inside. But that, security people, they were just civilians. They just said, no, we will keep it like that. Because Yanukovych had, by that moment, about 100 people who were, who secured this
area.
Yeah, 1,000 people actually. But it was from police, people from army. And in that moment when he left, he just told them, go home. And they left this residence without any security people. But local people, they organized. And when I came, it was a lot of people already there. It was early morning. And I told them that I'm from Gromadzki, and they told me, okay, you can go. So they let me in because I showed them that I was with camera, small camera for streaming. I told them that I will do stream from there. But when I came, first I saw it was like a greenhouse because he ate only food which was grown there. We suggest that he was afraid that he will be poisoned or something. And then I saw zoo
with animals,
with animals.
Tigers and panda. And
No, actually it was mostly horses or a lot of birds, big, small, like this, not pandas. Zoo more for Ukrainian animals like that. And I was like, where I am? Where is this luxury place? But when I came, I go right. And on that side, it was not the most important buildings. They were on different side. So first, and I was streaming. I was on TV. That this Medjugorje look vegetables, look animals, and it was like, really, where Yanukovych lived? Why he lived there? But it's so big territory.
There's also a lake, right?
Yes, for going from one point from point A to point B in embankment, you should spend 40 minutes walk. It's 140 hectares.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's very big. So I didn't have the map of Medjugorje, and of course I just was walking how I imagined that.
Could you just describe the house where he was living, because it's quite impressive?
Yeah, you're right. It's very impressive. When I stayed there for 8 days and went to that big house, Honka, then I came back from my one-room apartment in Kiev, and I was like, why I live so poor life? Because when you stay for a few days in this, in this golden stuff with big rooms, and when you come back to your real life, why I live in poor person. But actually it was very ugly. Yanukovych why decided to make big sauna. So his house looked like big sauna. I mean, it was wood inside, wood outside. So everywhere. It was very, very expensive wood, with some, mosaic, all the stuff. Wood and gold. Then some lamps, a lot of elements of gold, a lot of very expensive furniture. He also had some small church in his house with, all these golden icons, so all the things. When we were using elevator in his house, elevator had kind of Swarovski diamonds.
Why do you need Swarovski diamonds in elevator?
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, so it's like you even can't imagine it's possible, but it was possible at that place. Dmytro Hnap, my colleague, called me and told me that there are some journalists who found documents. You should find the way to the leak. And I just went there and found it was like maybe 5 journalists at the moment who just took some documents, some papers, but it was wet papers. And they said, we found it there. And I think there are more documents into the leak. And we need to figure out how to get them.
So your hypothesis was that when Yanukovych was fleeing the country, he just took all the important incriminating documents and threw them into the lake.
Actually, we also saw some places where documents were burned. Mm-hmm. So they burned the most important documents. I took them took the documents from them. But some important documents, not so important, but some of them, we think that they put into the lake to destroy them.
So what did you do?
First, we were really happy that we found something. I can't imagine what might be more important for journalists than find thousands of documents. I felt like, I found some gold or something.
But it was wet and it was destroyed.
Yeah, but
there were more probably in the water.
Yeah, so we tried to call every investigative journalist who were really interested, because many journalists from news came. They just took pictures, doing like videos for like 2-minute stories at some journalists. Some found the documents and let's go there to zoo, to other places. Yeah, but it was like, first it was about 10 journalists who were really focusing on figuring out what's the documents are, what numbers are there. We felt that it's something really important, but we couldn't start to work on them immediately because they were wet. And we knew that maybe it's something more, because some of journalists heard from local people that they saw that someone put folders with documents into the lake. So one of journalists somehow found scuba divers, like real scuba divers. And they came like in half an hour. I don't know, it was like magic. They came and we have this pictures, video, how they...
So they came in a full gear and
yes.
They just jump into the water, dive 20 meters and pull out the folders.
Absolutely. They worked also at night. Because I remember we have videos, they found some bullets also. It was some folders and some bullets, and I was filming that and I was streaming. But we stayed there. I stayed in Mazhigirya for 8 days. I just came there for doing this reporting and stayed there for 8 days.
Where did you live? Where did you sleep there?
We found we called it guest house. There were some locals who told us that there is some small guest house, you can stay there, work with documents. Because firstly, we worked on the place for boats, and it was very cold there. It was February, of course, it's just a place for putting like boats, because Yanukovych, of course, had some boats. And then we figured out that we need to stay with these documents. We can't leave them. We can't take them with us because it's not our documents. And some locals told us there are guest house, so we should go there with all the documents and slept there. And I remember because I didn't have like anywhere, and we found some room of director, of some manager of all this big complex, and he had like new shirts. And
so you just took the shirts and wear those?
I took white shirt. It was new, it was packed. And I just took it, and some days I was walking on that because I didn't have anything to wear, and I couldn't leave that place because when we figure out that we have a lot of documents and we needed to dry them, and we need to take pictures and make copies of them. That every hour, every minute was very, very important, and we couldn't leave the place.
So at the end, you have collected 25,000 documents. How do you dry 25,000 documents? It's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. At that guest house, we found a sauna. So we put some documents to sauna and just turn it on. And it was pretty. And we just put part of them and just then took them back, then put another part, took them back.
Did it work?
Yes, it worked. Also, we asked people to come to help us to dry documents, or at least to make copies of them, because some professionals from libraries, they came with this big stuff for drying documents. They told us that you have about 3 days before it will be destroying with water. We decided in first days that our main mission to make copies of them and just to put them to online for everyone who can see that.
And then you started to work on them and build stories. So what were the stories based on Yanukovych leaks?
We published, I think, 20, 30, 40 stories, like big stories about that. So mostly documents we found were about managing of Mezhygirya, of that complex, because we found that it was some administrative people, some tender committee, they were building, they were buying dogs, zoo, they were managing zoo, all this, buying food, all the stuff. So it was mostly documents and about price of furniture, price of building. So we published stories about companies, this network of companies around this Mezhygirya, which sending money, which were doing some reconstruction, building, all the stuff. And also we were able to figure out how much money Yanukovych spent for Mezhygirya. And in documents, we found how much it cost. So we could take picture of lamp and then see how much they paid for that. That's what was important for us, to figure out who, because of course Yanukovych for almost all his life, he was official. He was not able to get this money by legal way. So we saw how much money it was only for him, and also this big Honka house. Also, it was right next to it, like healthy spa complex for
like a wellness, private wellness.
Yeah, private wellness with barber shop, with all this, anti-age capsules.
Did it work?
Yeah, it worked. We saw in some notebooks, we saw his schedule for the day, and some of his assistants wrote it. We found a lot of these notebooks. And one of them, I remember that it was like solarium, sauna, then massage, and then one meeting with some person from government, and then again tennis. And all this
nice
stuff.
life.
Nice
Good life, right?
Yeah. And he really used all this anti-aging stuff. Also, they have their own gas station there, gasoline station, for...
Was it expensive, the gas, to buy a gas there?
It was for free, just for serving all this. Also, dog club. It was like a lot of dogs, mostly big dogs, from Asia. These big Asian dogs. Some of them were, it was like gifts from some people like Nazarbayev, the president, that time's president of Kazakhstan.
Did Yanukovych like dogs? Or was it just, to show off?
We also found some notes, some from internal documentation, when some person were writing that the Yanukovych came to a dog club and asked why some dog doesn't bark. And then they start to teach that dog to bark. It was internal documentation where people explained their bosses some mistakes or some wrongdoing, and one of case was about the dog which didn't bark. And then it makes more problem because it started bark a lot. So it was a crazy story. So what do we know about contacts between Yanukovych and dogs? Is that sometimes he came and asked why it barks, why it doesn't bark, or something like that. So if he loved dogs, we don't know, but sometimes he visited them. Also, he had place with ostriches. So
Why?
We think that he ate them. It was 20, 30 ostriches there. So, but we believe that he ate eggs and he also ate
The meat.
the meat of ostriches, yeah. So a lot of very interesting, strange stuff we found there. But we were trying to focus on signals of corruption. So yeah, we were trying to calculate money. And we found out that for Mezhigirya, Yanukovych spent about 2 billion hryvnias. So we published all the stories, but the most important that we didn't find how money came to him. So we saw how he spent that money for all these dogs, zoo, ostriches, this sauna house. But I believe that he or his people destroyed the documents how that money came to him.
Do you think there were documents?
I'm sure, yeah. Everything was very well documented. We believe it was bribes or something, but most likely they destroyed the documents in the beginning, and we didn't able to find who bring him money.
What is now with Mezhigirya?
For almost 10 years, it was opened for people like park. You can come there to walk there, to take a bike, all the things. Some people who doing weddings came there to take in pictures because it's a very nice place. Actually, it's in mountains and lake there, and it's a lot of very nice trees, a lot of very nice flowers there. And we as journalists for many years we had Mezhigirya Fest there, a journalism festival. But now, because of full-scale invasion, because of the big war, it's not possible to be there. It was some rocket came to the place, this Elling, where we had ceremony, where we had our conference, and where we start working, and it's destroyed. Now it's closed, and but now the state started caring about Mezhigirya, and we don't know what will be in future with that. People call it Museum of Corruption. It was very important for people to see.
You, let's say, lost the president, and now there must be new elections. Who was running in the upcoming elections?
It was a few people. One of the most the most powerful candidate who was in the end elected, it was Poroshenko. He was a long-time politician who looked like patriotic person, and people liked him, and he gave a lot of promises. And he looked like patriotic person compared to Yanukovych, of course, and he was elected.
He was also a businessman.
Yes.
So then another huge project with a huge impact came called Panama Papers. And you followed your president. And what did you discover?
Yeah, Panama Papers, when it was first project, big project, I was participated as journalist, and I was like, wow.
It was 2016, I guess.
It started 2015, and we published in 2016. And I was like, wow, it's the best journalists around the world, and I'm with them. What can I bring from Ukraine? But of course, when you have this databases, you start from first names, and first name was president names, and I just searched Poroshenko, and I found that very few months ago, before I found that, he by himself established company in BVI, British Virgin Islands. without this database, it was never been possible to discover it. Because BVI, one of offshore jurisdiction where all documents are closed from people, and it's not possible to journalists, to other people to find that documents. So what we saw when I worked for like 8 months before publishing, and we found out that in few months after election, Yanukovych established that company, and it was like a few offshore companies in BVI, Cyprus, other European countries, and we found some emailing between lawyers of Poroshenko, and of course we are journalists, we are not offshore professionals, and it was challenge to find people who can explain what's going on, what does it mean, all these words. And we figure out that that structure which Poroshenko built already as president, it looked like structure for selling the company, but with avoiding taxes in Ukraine. By that moment, his confectionery empire cost about between 2 and 4 billion euros or dollars. And we saw through that companies that it was prepared for selling without paying taxes in Ukraine, which was pretty...
Yeah, it's a wrong message if you are the president that you don't want to pay taxes, right?
Yeah.
Was he happy about your reporting, or did it have any impact, like very visible?
I think for my journalistic career, it was the biggest attack against me, against our organization for 2-3 months. Storm when people attacked.
Shitstorm, we can say.
Shitstorm, yeah, it was shitstorm. I was not prepared to that because at that times I thought that as journalist you publish story and then you can go to vacation. But after that story, I realized you publish story and you should be ready to protect, to support your story, to fight for your story, go to TV, go to explain what it means, because usually as investigators we publish complicated stories. It was a lot of attacks, it was many bot farms. We called them Porocho bots, because Poroshenko, these bots who, it was like not real people who just texted like bad stuff about you. And
could you give example of what they wrote about you?
They wrote me that I'm a young woman, I can't figure out with so complicated stuff, I should go to kitchen and care about kids, and I don't know about what I'm talking, I'm too stupid to figure out with so complicated stuff with this hard man's word and I'm not able to do that. That was like kind of direction. That also it was some like a friendly meeting. I met with some my former colleagues or people I knew volunteers, and they told me stop doing this because you have a kid. My daughter was 1 year old by that moment, and they told me no, you are not in good position, focusing on some other stuff, better for you, don't do this. I can say that it was not like something to scare me, but it looked like friendly recommendation, just stop working on this story. But then I figure out who sends it, people to advise me, because it was not fact mistakes there. Because Poroshenko has pretty good lawyers, had at that time and has now. If it was any mistake, he would sue us, he would destroy me, reputation of organization. But we worked as part of international community. We worked with OCCRP, and it was fact-checked very good. So it was absolutely no fact problem, and they tried to find like problem with form.
Did you doubt yourself during the process? Did you doubt the story?
I didn't doubt with facts because I knew that he created Offshore, but I doubt a lot about storytelling because really if I knew that this is part of attacks against us, but for me it was chance to look better on details, how I work, how I tell my stories. And before that, I think in Ukraine, journalists and me as well, we didn't think about storytelling. We just find information and just produce it how we imagine. And after that, I start go to some trainings, ask our colleagues from Sweden to help us to tell complicated stories, how to tell these stories, because I knew that, of course, it was part of attack. But for me, as a journalist, very important to be as clear as possible and don't leave the space for manipulation for people who are against the story.
Talking about presidents, your very close colleague and co-founder of Slidstvo, Dmytro Hnap. He was also running for the president, and it really put you into a difficult spot. So what was going on?
We created Slidstvo with Dmytro Hnap because we believed in professional journalism, and we wanted to create something really professional, investigative journalism without any influence, without any censorship. And we were pretty successful on that way. And Dmytro Hnap, mostly he operated with everyday stuff in Slidstvo. We had weekly TV show on national TV, and he cared about that. But I was mostly focused on international projects like Panama Papers, like we published documentary about killing journalists. So I was focusing on big international projects. But in 6 years after we established, 2018.
After Panama Papers,
after Killing Pavel documentary, after many stories we published, when we already had pretty good name of agency, pretty good reputation as journalists, Dmytro decided to leave journalism, to leave Slidstvo, because he always had politician ambitions. I knew that, but for many years when we worked together, I always told him, Dmytro, no, it's not the time. Maybe later. Yeah, but and he was pretty good journalist. It was very comfortable for me to work with him. I knew about politician ambitions, but he never put this part to our work. He worked really hard, so he knew what is investigative journalism. But then he told me that he wanted to go to be a politician. By that moment, I didn't know that he will run for presidential position.
Wait, just how is it possible to run for the president if you really caused a trouble to the president, to the previous president? You know, is there a conflict of interest, or you pretty much destroyed your competition by exposing his wrongdoings? So is it the time to run for the president?
It was his decision. For me, how I feel this life, that it's never time for journalists to be a president, to be a politician. That's how I think, but it was his way and he chose that. I didn't know that he wanted to be president, but actually I don't think he wanted to be president. He wanted to announce himself as politician on that campaign. Yeah, he was pretty popular. People knew him from TV, from every week TV show, because when we were walking on the streets, people came to him, Dmytro. They didn't know me, they didn't know others.
You've been in the kitchen in the meantime.
Yes, in the kitchen, of course, and kids, and church. But he was popular. People knew him like person who fighting with corruption, who fighting for good stuff, like Superman. And he just wanted to convert this reputation to politic way. So I was okay with that, but I told him that if you decide, you will never come back to Slidstvo. We created this, we worked good, but even if you went to a politician and then realized that it's not good for you, you will not come back to Slidstvo, because it's not how I imagine journalism, because I became the head of Slidstvo and all managing process, everything were on me, and I told him good luck, but no way to Slidstvo, no way back to Slidstvo. And he was okay, so I started working with managing with looking for money. It was new stuff for me, managing all these processes, because mostly I was investigator. I worked as journalist, as editor, but I didn't know what to do, how to manage organization with, it was like 12 people by that moment there, to figure out not only how to find corruption, how to prove corruption, how to find money and spend them in right way, and hire right journalists and teach journalists.
And who can give you money.
And who can give you money. Yeah.
Give you money.
And of course, we lost the most popular player. Dmytro Hnap was very popular. Slidstvo.
Like the most popular personality.
Yes, and then like new challenge came.
It's also connected to Dmytro Hnap.
Yeah. The presidential campaign already started. We almost didn't connect with him. I mean, when he left Slidstvo, we were kind of friends, but I told him that you're a politician now, so we can't be like absolutely close friends. Yeah. But one moment, some journalists who worked with Slidstvo when Dmytro was the head of organization, they asked me, do you remember that international award what Slidstvo got from some Norwegian organization?
Fritt organization.
Right. It was 15,000 euros. We got this young investigative organization in 2015, and Dmytro publicly promised that all money we got as journalistic organization we will give to army, because the war just started. I mean, on the east mostly the war was focusing on the east for this year. Russia invaded Ukraine, but the battles were on the east, and it was pretty popular to give money to army, and I was not agree with that. But 3 years after that happened, even in 4 years after that happened, during the presidential campaign, some journalists who used to work with Slidstvo asked me, what happened with that money? Did you manage to send them to army? And I said, okay, I should figure out. And I start figure out with financial department, with other people. And I realized that the journalists were doing investigation, their own investigation. What
on
happened?
Dmytro Hnap.
Yeah, as candidate on presidential position. Then I called Dmytro and I told him what happened with money. And he said that partly we sent it to army, partly I spent for organization needs. And then he said that 9,000 of euros in his deposit box in the bank. It was cash. I told him, why? It's money of Slidstvo, it's not your money. And he said that, I decided that it's money owned by you and me because we are the main person of organization. And I decided that I will leave it for myself, for maybe my start as politician. But I didn't tell it to you because you wouldn't like that. I told him, you're right, I wouldn't like them because it's money for organization. You know that I had problem with paying rent of office, paying people for business trips, and I didn't know that you save that money in your private box in bank. And he said, okay, I will give the money back. I told him, you should understand that some journalists who worked with Slidstvo are now doing investigation. You should be prepared. It will be scandal. When I figure out that he did really wrong thing against organization, I decided that I should be the person who make it publicly. So I published on my social networks that we found really bad story in our organization. We found out it now, and he promised that he will give this money back as soon as possible. So I was trying to be like mostly reporter in this.
Fair.
And I just tried to hide what I felt emotionally. Some of my colleagues, they really were not happy with that. They texted me, why you published that? His politician career finished immediately after that.
Did he return the money, or did he send
Yes.
it to army?
He sent it to our to Slidstvo accounts after 2 days after that story, because it was a really big scandal. He sent money to organization, and we sent that money to foundation which sent it to army. So yeah, they texted that we got money from Slidstvo, we spent them for army, some drones or something, I don't remember. Yeah, so we finished that case.
Did you talk ever after?
Never.
Never again? Who won those elections?
Volodymyr Zelensky, our heroes.
He won, but he doesn't like your reporting
Of
as
course.
well. So what was the other big project that pretty much shook this president?
One of my dream to open a new league, database league, and don't find presidential names there. It never
would be
happened before.
That would be your happy ending, to open a leak and there's no president in
No
the data.
president, and see, like, I have nothing to do. Because every league, every president.
Okay, so let's talk about the project that got a name Pandora Papers.
Yeah.
And was based on leaked documents from different jurisdictions, secrecy jurisdictions, and different legal companies who were setting up offshore structures for prominent people.
Yeah, we found out some documents there from, let's say, past life of Zelensky. Before he became Ukrainian president, he had his company which produced comic show and some TV programs, like mostly like something funny.
Was it funny?
It's not my type of humor, but for some people it was funny. It was pretty popular. And also before election, like couple years before, they published very popular TV series, Servant of People. At that story, Zelensky is the main person, who just poor teacher from small city who decided to be president. And he said that I will clean the system. I will be like real president and using a bike for going to the war, all the stuff.
So fiction.
Absolutely fiction. And because a lot of people watched that Servant of People, and also Zelensky named his political party Servant of People. So when we started working on Pandora Papers, we found some complicated offshore structure, and we saw that companies connected to Zelensky and his people and his production company, it was like few years before election, they were connected to the biggest oligarch in Ukraine, Igor Kolomoyskyi. He was the owner of Privatbank, and there are a lot of criminal cases around there because of money laundering. And we found connections between Zelensky companies and Kolomoyskyi, who was owner of biggest TV channel, and they sent big money each other. So some money from Kolomoyskyi company, it was like $40 million.
Wow.
Were sent to Zelensky companies, and we were trying to figure out, might it be money for production of his company, or it's some money laundering. So it was how we saw that, talking to experts. It looked like Zelensky and his company, when he was showman, might be part of money laundering of that billionaire, Kolomoyskyi.
So, and then the war broke. Right. So when and how did you realize, how did you accept that there is going to be a real big war with Russia?
I think 1-2 months before the war, it was...
So it was some kind of a end of year, beginning of January?
Yeah. It was a lot of stories in international media, not in Ukrainian or Russian. In international media, it looks like Russians will go to Ukraine, and because they showed some satellite pictures and it looked like Russia concentrated soldiers there. Yeah. And then I talked a lot with my colleagues from...
So you called a special meeting to tell them, guys, there is going to be a war. We need to do this and that.
Of course, first it looked like, oh no, it's not, it's never. Because people in Ukraine were not ready for that. People believed, no, it will never happen. Okay, we have this war on the east, we're already okay with that, but no big war. First, I talked to head of OCCRP, Drew Sullivan, and people from OCCRP network who experienced the war. They put us the list of what we need to buy to being reporters or to just live in occupation or something.
How did you learn that the Russians crossed the borders?
I woke up at 5 a.m. because of bombing. It was very, very loud.
Yeah, but you're sleeping and then, there is the bombing. It's not really... I'm not sure I would understand what's going on. You did?
Yeah, because we were preparing. We knew that war might start every day. And the day before it starting, my boyfriend now, my husband, he called me and told me that the war might start that night. He had some sources who told him that it might start, and he told me better for you not be in Kiev. And me with my 6-year-old daughter, we went to a house of his dad outside of Kiev, and all his family were there. Being outside of Kiev looked better because in case of leaving, you will not go to traffic jams. And that morning we woke up because of bombing. And first thing I do, of course, I called my mom, my brother, and then I called to financial manager of Slidstvo and told her, please pay 2 salaries to all of people if you still can operate with banking, because we were prepared that banking system will not work. And text people on our chat that if you have possibility now to take money, just go and take money. And then I think in 7:30 a.m. we had editorial call, and everyone told me about plans, what to do, go to office. Many people just come to office. We talked about our plans, and I asked more and more questions what we want to do. Then we figure out that even in case of big war, we stay in Kiev. People with kids or with some obligations say that they will have to bring their families to safe place and then come back to Kiev and work. And then I talked to my friends and colleagues from other countries to help us to figure out what we need. I talked to OCCRP journalist from Bosnia who stayed in Sarajevo for 4 years when Sarajevo was
under siege.
Yeah, and she put the list of needs, what we need, starting from like women should cut off their hair because it's not way to care about hair. Maybe you will not have shower for months, so better just cut it.
Well, you still have a long hair.
Yeah. It is. But I mean, we had these instructions what to do in case you're in occupation or you don't have access to water or something, what kind of wear you should have. For example, she told us that we don't have to wear black stuff. Better to wear something bright, yeah, for looking like civilians. It doesn't work in Russians now, we know that. But anyway, it was some small details which helped us to imagine how it will be. We bought water, food. Our colleagues from Romania gave us bulletproof vests. We had the stuff for cleaning the water, the tablets for cleaning the water, there's some equipment for cleaning the water. So we, for months and a half, we preparing with this small stuff, how we will survive first, and second, how we will work as media second. And when the war started, 5 person from our media stayed, and they live in office, because office in downtown, and it looked like more safe place for many people who lived in big buildings, like 11, 12 floors building. So for me and for my journalists, for my colleagues, it was kind of, psychological preparing that we might be in circumstances like this. I know that many other newsrooms, they were not able to work for months or more, investigative newsrooms, because they didn't know what to do. And then people were like, not so bad, we live in office, we still have light, we still have possibility to buy food, we still have some stuff, so not so bad scenario how we plan. Some of them wanted to be volunteers, go to army. By now 5 of journalists from Slidstvo in army.
What they do in army, if you can talk about it.
Different stuff. Some of them doing some informational stuff. So they're looking for information. Some of them really in front line. They're doing like more army stuff. Like
shooting people?
Yeah. Some of them. We also asked our colleagues from Bellingcat, and they gave us 3 days training. How to find Russians in their networks, in their social networks, this all this Одноклассники, ВКонтакте, because Russians have their own social networks. And we, for first almost 1 year, we didn't work with stories about corruption, about government. So from the first day of the war, we started publishing stories about identifying of Russians who came to Ukraine. And we grown a lot. I think we got like 10 times more subscribers on our YouTube. Even Russians came to our YouTube. We even translated to Russia some stories to show about Russians who came, committed war crimes, and also on frontline reporting. Ukrainian prosecutors, Ukrainian police, they were absolutely not ready, not prepared for that, and they asked my journalists to train them. And
so you've been training prosecutors in how to find enemy combatants on your territory?
Yes, they usually investigated internal crimes. They had their own databases, but they were not prepared how to find criminals from other country without no cooperation, of course, with Russian police. We never cooperate with prosecutors or police, but at that moment we decided that we can do it.
So you started to focus more on the war crimes, and you needed to move the lines that we as investigative reporters could not cross, and still you decided to do it. So in one of the war crimes, it was a story about kidnapping kids from Ukraine and placing them in Russia to Russian families. What I do consider quite a terrible war crime, by stealing the kids and giving them somewhere where they don't want to be. How this story developed? How did you find out the kids who were kidnapped? You have a story of Masha and Nastya, 2 girls you saved from enforced exile in Russia, or to put it more clearly, 2 girls kidnapped from Ukraine to Russia. How this story developed? How did you find out the kids who were kidnapped?
We figured out that it was some in Kherson, it's big city. It was some places where very small kids, like under 1 year kids, who were just their mom left them, in hospitals.
Abandoned kids.
Yeah, abandoned kids. And Russians just put all of these kids before the occupation. And one of our journalists, she found on Instagram some Ukrainian kids who were stolen right before, in 1 week before the occupation, because Russian knew that they will left the territories in the south. They organized kind of camp in Crimea for kids from
It's
Kherson.
kind of a summer camp.
Yeah, so they said you just leave and go for Crimea. Crimea is a nice place, also occupied by Russians for a long time, but it's very nice place with the sea, with good nature. And that kids, I'm talking about 2 girls, they were 16 and 17 years old, and they decided to go to Crimea for 2 weeks. That's what Russians said, and all documents were saying that in 2 weeks they will come back.
Yeah, just take a break from the war and have a
it
good
looked
time.
like that. Their parents agreed, but then after 1 week, territories were deoccupied, and Russians told them, no, you're staying here. It's not safe for you to come back to your home, to your parents, to Kherson. You should stay here.
And they wanted to stay or not?
They didn't. They tried to find any way to come back home because they have parents there, they had friends there, and they really wanted to be in Ukraine. And then we found out that it was a lot of cases.
So the place was everything but some kind of a summer camp. So how did it look there, and what was the most challenging part of the stay of the girls there?
It was like dormitory, mostly dormitory, but without heating. It was pretty cold there.
So we are talking, let's say, December, November, in a dormitory without any heating.
Yeah, and we asked them to film their conditions of living. And there was no water. They could take shower only once per week.
Once per week?
Once per week they got hot water for 2 hours or something like that.
They also were kind of re-educated to start to speak and write in Russian and to start to listen to Russian anthem and pretty much becoming Russian. So what was the plan with the Russians, with those kids that were brought there? To make them Russians?
Yeah, of course. What they do with all Ukrainian kids, any age kids, so they already put them to Russian system of education. So they have this national patriotic lessons, and they tell kids that you are part of big Russia, and they started immediately, right after they bring kids. From next day, you're going to Russian school, you should speak in Russian, you should do all the Russian patriotic stuff. So Russians are very aggressive with that. So they're doing it right from next day. And if they try to speak Ukrainian, if they have Ukrainian book or something, they were punished for that.
How punished?
According to girls, what they told us, they had some other boys, teenagers, who were singing Ukrainian songs. And they said that some military people came to them and bring them to some hole on the ground, and they
like a basement.
I don't even think that it was basement. It was they digged hole, and they beat them. They thought that they had some on their faces. It was done by Russian militaries, and they just showed that teenagers who wanted to be Ukrainians. They showed them, they explained them that you will go to jail, or after so that, how to say this, educational moment.
You mean brainwashing?
Yeah, something like that. And I don't think that many teenagers, kids might resist. They don't want to be beaten. They have no parents around. They have no relatives around. So they're absolutely in hands of Russian propaganda, of Russian militaries, of Russian educational system. So I don't think even that girls, they looked like they wanted to resist. They had arguments with Russian teachers. But I think in some months, in the end, they would be part of Russian educational system. And our journalist found that girls and told them, okay, we can help you.
I do remember, because I saw the documentary, and I do remember when you try to talk to different agencies and try to find out what to do, how to save those two girls who were quite desperate, quite unhappy at the place where they were living, and how they were living, and how they were forced to sing the Russian anthem and pretty much becoming Russians, and how you talk to the agencies and everyone is saying like, we can't do anything, and then, you know, there's just your voice, not your face, saying, well, if there is no one who can do anything, it must be us.
Yeah, it was a little bit activism, but we already, you know, we were at situation, we were never prepared as professional journalists, because when we're doing classical investigations, we knew how to communicate with officials, how to communicate with criminals, how to save journalists before publishing, story after publishing. I had a lot of security training, so I understand what to do with that. But when you deal with like humans in their lives, and especially kids, you had no trainings to how to deal with that. So we found them, we asked them to take pictures, videos of place they live, and they recorded everything for us. But of course we decided that we will publish that only after they will come back. We already felt responsibility for them as journalists, because we asked them as source to record some stuff. It's not possible to record by journalists what's going on there with kids.
Could you just take me what was on your mind when you decided to help them, you know, to break all the journalistic rules, to be observer and become part of the story?
We talked a lot in our editorial meetings. We talked if we are just journalists, because I'm very strong with professional standards, because I don't want to be activist. I'm a journalist and I want that my organization will be just journalistic organization. And we talked, okay, they are our sources in very hard place, in very bad place, in very hard circumstances. So we just tried, what was my motivation, how I explained it for myself. We tried to save our source, our young, brave sources who just did stuff, very dangerous stuff for them. At that time, and now as well, it was very hard to get information what's really going on in occupation. And we decided to do it by ourselves.
So you pretty much decided to bring the girls home.
Yeah, it was like 4-day trip with few buses. And the hardest stuff was to cross border between Russia and Estonia, I believe, or
That was a long trip.
Of course, because it's not possible to cross because it's front line there. We have no border, it's front line. So they had to go through all the Russia, then to some, it was Estonia or Latvia or Lithuania, Poland, and then come to Ukraine. So it was 4-day trip. And in every moment they were recording video for our journalists, and they told some drivers and others that they are going for the marriage of some of their relatives, and our journalist legend was that our journalist is their auntie. So, and they called her like auntie, like we are on our way. For us, it was very scary because one of girl was 17. According to law in Russia, in Ukraine, kids under 18 should cross border with parents. But fortunately, somehow, it happened.
So there was a happy end.
It was happy end, but not a lot of cases with happy end. Many Ukrainian kids are still in Russia, and they are smaller, and they don't have social networks, and we don't know how to save them, how to bring them back, and situation in general really sad.
Would you do it again?
In general, no. I mean, if we start working on stories like that, and I will feel better, don't work on stories like that, because that finished good. But if because of us some kids got more trouble than they were, it would be hard for me to live with that. Better no, I wouldn't do that.
If you would need to choose, and you may get into this position if you are, investigative reporter writing about Ukraine but doing damage to Ukraine by revealing corruption in the army, mishandling of the, military aid from the West. Or you wouldn't report on it and be the good citizen and, trying to, let the army problems to be resolved by the army. What would you choose?
I already chose. I mean, we had a lot of discussions in the beginning of the war. If we will know something bad about army, about corruption during the war, would we report? I told my journalist and I told myself that we will report. And in the beginning, we had for first year of the war, even our sources, which we had before the war, they kept silence. They said, let's talk after the war. We have some stuff to tell, but after the war. Because in first months, we believed that it will finish soon and we will have time to report about it, to investigate that. But then we figure out that it's for a long time. And if we will close eyes what's going on, we will just lose the country. And I think around 1 year, first year of the war, we almost didn't report about corruption. And it was problem to obtain proofs. But when we start obtaining documents or start researching for databases and found some bad stuff about government, about army, we start publishing. Because I still think that better to have many small scandals than very big scandal in the end, which might collapse the state, the country. I don't believe in keeping silence, hide important stuff, and then we will pretend that nothing happened. I mean, for me, it doesn't work this way. Yeah, it's hard time, it's war, but part of the victory, part of successful, end of this war, this part on our government, on our people. And when we start figure out that people decided to buy expensive apartments for $1 million or just leave country legally, going to Maldives or somewhere using state money for their own, for their own private stuff, we realized that we should publish that, because that people had more responsibility than other Ukrainians. That's why we should look at them if they do good housekeeping during hard time. Being investigative journalist, you always enemy for the country and for some people. It's harder situation, yeah, but we are journalists. And if it's important, if people should know about that, they should know, even hard stuff.
How do you see that, the new challenges of your job, the new transformations of your job as investigative reporter? What do you expect? What do you predict?
It's hard to predict anything at that situation, but of course we will investigate. We always will investigate everything. But then a few months ago, I realized that the end of the war will open harder times. I mean, we should prepare, have energy, have people, have money from somewhere after the war, because, many people were killed, many people went crazy and will go crazy because it's very hard to live in that kind of stress. And what I predict that it will be a lot of bad politicians who came back, bad people who just who just went to Monaco or somewhere during the war, and then they come back to Ukraine and start to build Ukraine. And we as journalists need to look into them very, very carefully, and we need to have energy for that. What we see now, it's pretty pessimistic scenarios for Ukraine and for the world as well. I mean, as I understand, many people preparing to the third war, and I'm a little bit afraid that in this big stuff which might happen, everybody just forget about Ukraine, and we will be just territory with just territory under Russian territory, no one interested in. So unfortunately, no optimistic scenarios now, but somehow I believe I really want to live in Ukraine. I want my kids to live in Ukraine, and that's why I need to work hard as journalist and doing everything I learned before as journalist and just doing my good job. It's only one way to survive and to have some hope.